Hey everybody, and welcome to the Bitcoin Consultant podcast. This is the first episode where I'm recording with a good friend of mine called Alex McMillian. Alex is a civil engineer and a project manager, and he's a self-described opinionated commodities bull with contrarian global macro views and an advocate of the Austrian School of Economics. Alex, thanks for being my first guest and jumping on the pod. So I wanted to touch on three things in this podcast. So first of all, a little bit into your background. You've got a pretty interesting background from bodybuilding, engineering, and then being a real gold bug. But then secondly, sort of jumping into a bit of the history around precious metals and gold, and sort of what are your arguments for and against it. And then lastly, we'd close the podcast out in the third section with some of your thoughts on Bitcoin and crypto, as well as starting your own business, which you've also got, property, tech stocks, and a few other things as well. So does that sound all right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect. All right. So can you tell the audience a little bit about your background? And I thought it'd be really interesting just to start with Alex, the bodybuilder, first of all, because I think everybody looks at you and they're like, yeah, that guy's quite hench.
Yeah, so the bodybuilding thing, just going through university, playing rugby and studying, eating loads. And we had access to university gyms. I was like, yeah, cool, let's go there. And lift weights, put on loads of weight. And I thought, oh, maybe I should try this in front of a few thousand people wearing Speedos. So I did that and worked out quite well. Did a few shows, qualified British finals, came in top 6 in the UK, under 80 kilo open class. So and it was kind of cool. It's good thing about it is that, especially going through university where everything is very, very loose and people turn up and lectures whatever time they want and you're out drinking and eating constantly, the party life. This kind of gave me a lot of like regiment. You wake up, you're eating chicken and rice and broccoli, and then egg whites, and then chicken and rice and broccoli, and then egg whites, and then fish, 3 hours, and then you sleep. And you're sleeping religiously on time every night, waking up, training. It gives you a really good routine, discipline. Mm-hmm. Days you don't want to go, you force yourself to go anyway. And actually that kind of stuck through my life, just in general, having like a routine. And if you're not eating well and you're not taking care of yourself physically, then I think your mind gets a bit cloudy sometimes. Mm-hmm. So it kind of gives you the kind of clear, concise thought.
Yeah.
As well as looking jacked.
Yeah. And so do you think, was bodybuilding influential in you sort of, leaning into becoming Alex the engineer, or is that something you knew that you always wanted to get into?
It's something that I always wanted to get into. So as I came out of high school, my grades were pretty good, not the highest. And in high school, I did maths, physics, chemistry, biology, all the sciences, and I was like the sports captain as well. And it's time to get a job. It's time to, at school you're taught, get a good grade, you go to good uni. You go to a good uni, you'll get a good job. You get a good job, you'll be rich, and then you retire when you're 45 and live on a yacht. That's what they tell you at school. So, finishing high school, I was like, I need to get a job. I want to work in an industry where there's always work, high in supply, high in demand, something that involves a lot of thinking, that's highly paid, but I don't care so much about the pay. It's more about, I don't want to be left unemployed. A lot of people now, they go to university, they study some bullshit degree, and then they come out of university with high grades, and then they can't figure out why they can't get a job. Well, the degree you did isn't really applicable in everyday life. The thing with engineering is that you can do lots of different things with it. Even though it's civil engineering, you can branch into consulting, you can branch into banking, you can branch to anything that's analytical, that's problem solving. Plus, there's always infrastructure work going on anywhere in the world. So when UK dried up, they're trying to send graduates to the Middle East, Qatar and stuff, and they're paying stupid money, tax-free for grads. So that was kind of tasteful as well. So did my engineering degree, did my master's, got my job. I love my job as an engineer. I work on some of the biggest projects in the Southern Hemisphere. It's an honor to work on these projects. But at the same time, no one's ever gotten rich from a 9 to 5. Even if you're very high ranking and you're still trading your hours for money. Which
I guess not your definition of rich. Like even if you're Jamie Dimon, he's still got to rock up to the company, even if that's what he likes doing, and he gets paid a lot of money for it. It's not your definition of rich or wealth in that time.
Yeah. And
okay.
freedom as well. Having to ask someone permission to take time off work so you can go to like a relative's funeral. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
I'm with you for sure.
Yeah. You don't want that. You want to be financially free.
So I think that kind of is a good segue. So Alex, Alex the engineer, he finishes university, he gets a job in engineering. He has these aspirations of, it sounds like you wanted to get wealthy, I suppose, get rich, maybe not necessarily through work. And so I'm guessing around this time you started to think about how can I invest some of the money that I'm saving on the side from my engineering job? What's the best way to grow my wealth, right? And so can you talk us through, what that journey was like and how you got to your, I guess, overall investment thesis?
Yeah. So it started with lockdown. And I think lockdown helped a lot of people. Gave a lot of people clarity. And I was doing the whole thing where you just mindlessly scrolling Instagram and Facebook, whatever. Stumbled across a 2-minute video clip. And it was Robert Kiyosaki on London Real. And he talks about this is what the rich do to get rich and how they avoid paying taxes legally. And I was like, cool. Well, lockdown's here. We're in Melbourne, Australia, which had the harshest lockdowns in all the world. Curfews, the whole lot. So all I had was time and got his Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. Read that. Then I read the next one, and it was like, okay, cool. So this is how the system works. This is how the financial system works. This is how you don't pay taxes. This is how you structure a corporation or a business to legally avoid taxes. And then it's all right, cool. So we're chasing money, but that's the whole point. You want to get money, but then you kind of delve into what is money. Right? So everyone's chasing dollars. This shit. Because that's what we think money is, right? You look at your bank, you think you're rich because you see digits on the screen. But then you're kind of questioning, is this really what money is? How are people getting paid so much yet everyone's still struggling? So then they kind of further then maybe investigate into the history, what wars have been fought over, why it is the way it is. And that's where I am today. And I think all of us are somewhat still questioning this. And even people who are sure that they know what money is, don't quite know themselves.
So that's a good a great question that I'll flip to you. So what is money to you?
Gold.
Money is gold. Yeah. Okay.
And silver.
Gold and silver.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And how did you come to that? And why a gold and silver money?
It's something which is throughout history, 5,000 years, people have always looked at different stores of value. They've looked at seashells, they've looked at tulips, they've looked at currencies, fiat currencies, straw, hay, everything. And they keep going back to gold. Even empires that weren't even linked were still mining the same things. It's because it's recognizable back then as being a kind of yellow, silver, yellowy color. Kind of stood out from all the other crap. And the fact it doesn't rot, doesn't corrode. An ounce of gold in 1,000 years' time will still weigh an ounce. You can't create it, can't destroy it. All you can do is mine it. So, and then JP Morgan, original, in 1913, for a Congress, announced gold is money and everything else is credit. And if the top central bankers are saying that type of stuff, the top bankers are saying that type of stuff, then
yeah, I think you're touching on Yeah, there's definitely a long, interesting history, which I'm, still learning about now, with respect to different types of money. I think a lot of people have heard money's changed over time, and as you said, we've used many different forms. Early civilization, without money is just bartering, which is, if we want to do a trade, you've got some spears and I've got some shields. And I want to buy some spears off you, but you don't want my shields, then it's very difficult to trade. And so money is this sort of middle layer that facilitates transactions, makes it much easier to happen. And what you're touching on there with gold as well is something that's scarce and durable over time. And there's a bunch of academics have kind of spoken about all of the various different properties that a good money should have. So we mentioned scarcity, we mentioned durability. There's also it needs to be portable. Ideally is divisible as well, so you can have smaller and larger amounts of gold that you can carry around. And I think that's also why silver was preferred as well, right, for a period of time, because there was a little bit more of it. And so for a person's paycheck back in the day, I think like a soldier's paycheck, they could get like a small amount of silver would be a week's salary, but the same amount of gold would be like a month's or something like that. And it was just it was too much, not as divisible as silver, or not as common. So yeah, really interesting background there. Why do you think, I guess in more recent history, society it seemed to have forgotten gold for a period of time, like not completely out of mind. Obviously Indians and Chinese, they love their gold, but in terms of, I guess, society's viewing it as money, it seemed to have been forgotten for a while, at least until more recent history in developed countries, where it's like, shit, inflation is a real problem again now, and you see central banks buying it up and people buying up gold. Why do you think it got forgotten, and why do you think it's sort of come back?
This is an interesting thing. I don't think gold's ever forgotten. And I think it's, again, so ingrained in us that I doubt you could probably go a day without somehow seeing the word gold, hearing the word gold, saying the word gold. People often ask, what's a good investment? Where do I put my money? If I have it in the bank, inflation will corrode it. And if I buy this, and where do I put it? Everyone's really worried about it. And to me, it's almost like, when you're in a panic and you're in a rush and you're holding your car keys and you're searching your house trying to find your car keys and you just can't find them. Or you have glasses on your head and you're looking for your glasses. I feel like that's what's happening with gold. It's in front of you. You listen to the radio, Gold FM, listen to ABBA Gold, it's there. Everyone knows it's valuable.
Yeah.
Kanye will tell you, she ain't nothing but a gold digger. Ain't messing with no broke people. But but it's there. It's in your face. We all know it's valuable. It's in the songs and everything,
Yep.
But I think when it came off the gold standard, well, they made it illegal for a long time. So our parents kind of forgot about it.
So this was
too busy. You're
referring to 61 Executive Order 6102 in 1933. Is that what you're talking about? Where they?
Yes, so that's when Roosevelt. He basically, the US is broke, Great Depression. So what he did, he confiscated all the gold from all the people. Because back then, individuals had gold, little bags of gold, and he confiscated it. He said you can have, I think, 5 ounces, something like that. Anything more than confiscating it, we'll pay you $20 an ounce, which is what the going rate was at the time. And a year later, he revalued it at $35 an ounce. So they're able to basically double their balance sheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time as doing that, he also still kept it legal to own. So a lot of people in the US didn't own gold. You couldn't own gold of significant value. You couldn't own sovereigns. The only gold you could have would be in the form of like jewelry, necklaces, things like that. So go back to our grandparents and our great-grandparents. They were very, very protective of their jewelry box. That was their pride possession. And we always, as kids, we always thought that's because it's, it's sentimental and this, like the other. It's nothing to do with sentiment. It's to do with that's actual value in the form of a bracelet, in the form of a necklace, pearls, diamonds, earrings. Like no one's, trying to steal a jewelry box for the friendship bracelets. No one cares about that. Right?
Yeah.
So our grandparents and our great-grandparents, they knew what gold was about because that was very recent to them. They got confiscated. Our parents, so the boomers, they're too busy having discos and stuff like that, so they don't care. They're on dollars. In 1971, they came off the gold standard, and after the money printers were able just to go bam, 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 bam. Credit cards came out in the 80s, so you were then just able to purchase stuff without actually having anything of value. And I think over time, people kind of.
Well, can we just before we go to the 71? So could you maybe talk through, just for listeners that aren't familiar with this transition, maybe the Bretton Woods agreement post World War II, and just sort of what led to the US, which is still the world's reserve currency, sort of coming off the gold
Just
standard.
Yeah. So you had Great Depression in Europe, in the US, and then in Europe you had hyperinflation of the Germany and something like that, and money printed them because war's expensive, right? And you either have no money after a war, or in the build of war, or you print loads of money to fund your war, right? At the end of the war, even though like the Americans at the time being an isolated continent, they just nuked Japan, war kind of finished. They had the gold reserves because they kind of set away. They said, right, what we're going to do is, this is Bretton Woods, 1944. And what they said is, all the currencies we pay to the dollar, and we trade in dollars, and the dollar will be pegged to gold. And anytime you want, you can change in your dollars for gold. And the rest of the world said, okay. Then, and this is actually part of the big issue, which is what I think globally we're all going to be in trouble when the US reserve currency changes. I'll get into that in a minute. So all the currencies are pegged to the dollar, all trading in dollars, dollars pegged to gold. And then America starts funding more wars in Vietnam. They're flying people to the moon. They're doing all this funky stuff. And I think the French president at the time said, how are you affording all this? You're paying in dollars to send people to the moon, space rate. You're doing all this cool stuff, but how are you affording this? I think you're printing money. I don't think that the dollars you have is all backed by gold. And then they said, we want our gold. So here's some dollars. And the US said, fine. And then slowly other countries started seeing it, and they all started converting their dollars back to gold. And then in 1971, Nixon said, look, we need to come off this gold standard because they're draining our reserves and we don't have the gold to actually back it. He didn't say we didn't have the gold, but they didn't have the gold to actually back it. So they temporarily came off the gold standard, right, in a war against the speculators, because they believed that the other countries were just speculating. And it was temporary. And to this day, it's still temporary. It's been, 1971, it's been 53 years now, in August, since it happened. And it's temporary, because I think we're going to go back to a gold standard.
Well, Nixon
it'll be a 60-year temporary suspension, I believe,
Yeah.
But this is the issue now. When most countries have had their own currencies backed by gold, and then every country becomes greedy, and they then print their own money, and then their currency hyperinflates, and then what they then do is they then go to a neighboring country that has a more stable currency, and they deal in that. So in Zimbabwe, when they had hyperinflation, they just went to the South African rand, for example. And the problem now is that all the countries that are experiencing hyperinflation, Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, Argentina, Venezuela, all these countries, they're all going to the dollar because that's a stable currency. But what if the dollar actually isn't stable itself and that collapses?
Yeah.
And this is where I think we're going to be now.
So it seems like inflation has been this constant thorn in the side for, certainly more so for developing countries, historically speaking, and even in developed nations like the US, we've had major bouts of inflation. We've had it here in Australia as well. But it seems that governments do intervene, and they're able to sort of tame it for periods of time where people are okay living with the reported inflation, whether you believe the CPI figure or not. I think some people refer to it as CP lie, but it seems that inflation can be tolerable for decades at a time until it seems to, break out. So are you saying that, the US and other sort of more developed economies and currencies are, now sort of getting into more runaway inflation, where the reserve currency, the US dollar, is no longer that safe haven?
So I think it comes back to the whole frog in water experiment. So the experiment goes like this: if you get a frog and you put it in lukewarm water, then you pour a kettle of water into it, the frog will jump out. Feel it's hot, jump out. If you get that same frog, put it in lukewarm water, and you slowly heat it on a fire, it doesn't realize it's getting hotter and hotter, and it will boil alive. I think people are the same. So if you have 2% inflation every year, you don't really notice it. You're getting poorer. People are getting more stressed out. Suddenly, you have to have 2 jobs per household instead of 1. And the quality of life is going down and down. You can't quite put your finger on why. But when you have 10% inflation, 20%, that's like kettle water going straight in. You realize that straight away. Shit, this pint of beer was $10, now it's 15. What the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think there's a big aspect of that. The other problem is, the longer something continues to go a certain direction, the more convinced we are to believe it will continue going in that direction.
Yep.
So the longer we rely on the US dollar, we believe, yeah, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe, it's safe. It's never let us down before. The longer that goes, the more we believe it. So when it does eventually break, the bigger the bang is going to be, unfortunately.
So how do you see gold, precious metals providing a solution to this sort of inflation of the US dollar? Like, first of all, what does that scenario look like when shit hits the fan, so to speak? And is there a boiling water moment where the frog does realize the water's a bit too hot? And yeah, so like, what does that moment look like? And then secondly, how does gold fix that problem?
So gold itself, and this is where silver comes in as well. So gold itself, historically, that's for buying ships, land, castles, houses, farms. Silver's for buying groceries. 30 pieces of silver will literally get you Jesus. It says in the Bible. That's what Judas got paid, right? So yeah, the silver is smaller denominations. I think when shit hits the fan, what I think will happen is, I think a lot of foreign countries are starting to sell US debt. Like Japan's getting rid of theirs. China, I think, just got rid of 70 billion in US treasuries, like overnight, like last week, something like that. Because no one wants it. They're understanding what it is. And I think the US now are printing $1 trillion every 100 days.
Something like that. Yeah, the interest expense on US debt is like $1 trillion per year, and that's more than they spend on military, just in interest repayments. So, right. And then you have additional spend on top. Right.
So they're spending crazy money, and they're printing this money. So your money is getting debased quicker and quicker, and that's essentially what inflation is. Inflation isn't. The price of things going up, but it's not really. It's actually the value of your dollars going down, right? Mm-hmm. And it gets to a point where you, in the end game, you just get paid, and you just want to spend your money on whatever you think will hold its value the longest. And I think people are already starting to get there. So people will buy things and say, yeah, I bought this, it's an investment, they hold its value, it goes up. It could be a piece of art, it could be like a watch, it could be whatever. And they don't want to be in dollars, they'd rather be in something else. And you can see it even more so in hyperinflating countries. Go to Argentina, go to Venezuela, go to those countries. That no one wants an Argentinian peso. No one wants it. As soon as they get paid, they try and convert it to dollars using the black market or whatever it is, or something they think will hold its value. So imagine you're walking down the street and you have no dollars on you. Dollars don't exist. Someone comes to rob you. What are they going to take from you? If you were to break into someone's house and steal from them and there's no dollars available, what would you steal? You'd go for their
belongings, right?
Yeah, you'll go for the stuff that's valuable, right? You go for the jewelry box, you go for their watches, you wouldn't go for their sentimental pillows or, you go for, I think this is what's going to happen now. more people will understand what's actually intrinsically valuable when you don't have the dollar value. So, I mean, I actually bought like a little show. I actually went to my vault today. So like, so it's like a silver Britannia, right? Silver coin. So it's 1 ounce coin. If I say to you like, I say like, what's more valuable, just on a piece of paper, like, or this piece of silver? What's the answer? It's obvious, right?
Yeah,
Silver.
I mean, but what if you held up a 100? I don't know how much that piece of silver costs, but if you held up $100 note, some people might say the piece of paper note still, right?
That's all paper. So now you got a note, right, with a number on it and a piece of silver. What's more valuable?
At $20, I'll probably still say the silver, but if that was a $200 note, I'd probably say maybe the paper.
Okay. $50 note.
Without knowing the price of silver, I still kind of prefer the silver.
$100 trillion Zimbabwe note.
Definitely the silver.
Right. So this is the thing. People are like, this is paper, that's paper, and that's paper. People are following the paper, they're not following the metal. This is the value. And I think this is part of the issue, is that because people follow numbers and they believe in government, that's all it is. This is endorsed by a government somewhere, which is why they attribute value to it. But when all things fail and you don't trust government, because they're going to try and step in and intervene, they're going to try and pump some CBDC on you, or, you know, then you're going to start looking at like, this is silver, this is gold, this is glass, this is diamond, this is wood. You know, then it goes back to what it actually is.
I guess so. You know, I'll play devil's advocate, and you'll be familiar with this argument, which is, it's not necessarily the intrinsic. Like if you go on the RBA website and they've got their own definition of what money is, and they talk through the different properties of money that an ideal money should have. They also say money itself doesn't need to have intrinsic value. That is, the money itself doesn't need to be worth anything. It's what you can buy with the money. And so I guess if someone's looking at a $200 note, or $100 trillion note, whatever it is, it's the value is obviously not the paper, neither is it the silver coin. It's more so I can go and buy, you know, be it a loaf of bread or a house with the money, right? And so people aren't collecting gold and silver because they plan to make a house out of it. And maybe you will, because I know you collect a lot of it. But in general, it's what can they buy, right? That's the value. It's the goods and services you can buy with the money. And I think for a lot of people, the idea of carrying around cash, even especially nowadays, be it paper money or coinage, seems really outdated and a little bit annoying to have to, you know, if you want to go, some people like it, I know, but some people, even like myself, right? I tend to not like to carry cash because it's less convenient than just taking my phone and tapping and paying everywhere I go. I don't have to carry around extra, you know, bits of change and that kind of thing. So what would you say to, you know, people that are of that mindset where money and cash in its physical form is a bit of a pain?
So, okay, so, and I was thinking about it today actually, because it all goes back to like Gresham's law, right? If you had to buy something for $1, right? So I've paid Gresham's law. Gresham's law is that when shit money comes out, good money goes into hiding. People hoard what they think is valuable and they get rid of what they think is shit. So if you had like a pack of M&Ms and like a few of them are like a bit deformed and shit looking, and you had to give away 5 M&Ms, you'd give away the shit ones first, right? That's Gresham. That's literally Gresham's law, right? So, okay. So, what's more inconvenient, coins or paper?
I don't know. I personally, I would probably say coins.
More inconvenient, correct. So, if you guys buy something for $1 and you have $1 note or 2 50-cent coins, you give away your coins first. Right? Yeah. Okay. But what if like the coins were like gold, and the paper with the same value but paper? you give away your paper first.
You see, the thing is, if you know they're the same value, I think a lot of people would give away the coins, and that's what people do today. So that's where I think the contention is. But on the flip side, most people also know that the coins that are in circulation today are not, you know, they might have a minuscule amount of gold, but they actually don't, right? So it's not like anyone's trading pure fine gold coins that, you know, could appreciate in value. It's more a mixture, like an alloy of crap metal, right?
So yeah, so have you heard the expression sound money? You've heard it before, right? And how sound money came about is back in the Roman times. If you get a silver coin and you want to check it was pure, you tap them together and it makes a ringing noise. I don't know if you can pick this up in the mic.
Maybe a little bit closer to the mic.
Right. I'm wearing headphones, so.
Yeah. Yep.
If you have normal coins, which are like alloys, these are 50-cent coins. It makes like a clap as opposed to a ring.
I don't think the mics are going to be good enough to pick it up, but it's more of a dull sound rather than that sort of like higher pitch cling that you get with the silver.
So with silver, it's like when you flick a silver coin, it sounds like a tuning fork, like a ting. When you have an alloy, it sounds like a clack. It's not the same. That's where the expression comes from. The sound money. It's the sound that silver used to make. And then equally with gold, because gold's very soft. How you check gold is real, you bite it and it leaves teeth marks. So whenever you see an Olympic medalist biting the coin, that's because 1,000 years ago,
checking the medal's real.
if it had brass in it or some shit, you wouldn't be able to bite it.
Yep.
So, and this is what I mean, like these are things which we see every day. You use the expression sound money, you see athletes biting trophies, you know.
But let me bring it back to this point of convenience and, you know, what the world would look like under a new gold standard, a renewed gold standard. Do you envision, you know, people carry around mainly silver coins and they keep the gold at home in a safe, and we transact using different sizes and values of silver coins? Or do you think, you know, because personally I can't see that. Or is a scenario where we still use digital currency, but we repeg to silver and gold in some sort of a fixed exchange, you know, rate, so that we're still on some form of a precious metal standard. Like, how does that play out?
It's such a tricky one because I can't see people going around with little bags of coins, and you know, I can't see that. I think. But as we start distrusting each other, which is because that's what the money's based on, right? If everyone trusts that like this will buy you something, then you'll accept it. When you no longer accept that this will actually purchase anything, you won't want it. And all right, if we're transacting in notes that are backed by gold, it's fine as long as I trust that you've got that gold and that I can redeem it sometime. But as soon as mistrust, I want the real thing, you know. So the reserve banks, and this is actually, it's amazing because reserve banks have been hoarding gold currently at the fastest rate since I think 1968 or 1969, and that was just before they came off the gold standard, right? Because they all knew that America was chatting shit about, you know, it being redeemable. So the reserve banks, they're the ones who are like, they're hoarding gold at the fastest rate. On the asset side of their balance sheet, the only thing that they've got that isn't a debt instrument is gold. So they're hoarding it, but they're also telling you, oh, don't worry about gold, it's inconvenient, it's no good, it's this, that, and the other, and you know, take these dollars that we're just printing left, right, and center, and you'll be okay. So part of me is like, I mean, like, I don't trust reserve banks in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever they say, I'm just kind of like, fuck you. But at the same time, I'm watching what they're doing, right? And I kind of appreciate it. I'm like, cool. You know, look, I get why you're saying it. You know, if everyone suddenly wanted to redeem their money for gold, there wouldn't be enough gold in the world to do it. or they have to reprice it at some crazy values, 40, 50,000 US dollars an ounce, if they were to, based on the current empty monetary supply of money. So there's that, right? With respect to Reserve Bank. For small transactions here and there, you do it online. You have, I imagine there'll be some sort of crypto on a blockchain backed by gold, and it will be several bodies that are auditing that gold exists. So the issue with Bretton Woods in 1944 is that it's solely up to the US to say, this is how much gold we have, this is how much money we've printed, and no one can question that. But at the moment, we have BRICS, and they're rising, and none of them trust each other, right? So when they're saying they're talking about basket of commodities, and Lord Keynes in the 60s did an experiment, experiment where he had a basket of commodities, narrowed it down to what would actually be suitable, and the only thing at the end that was suitable was gold, surprisingly, well, unsurprisingly. But the BRICS are doing the same thing now. They're going to go through a basket of commodities, and they're going to say, this is what we're going to back our currency with. But do you think like Russia and China and South Africa and Iran, do you think they would trust each other? Of course not. So they're going to say, right, we're going to have a BRICS currency or a token, but we can have independent bodies inspecting, making sure that that gold actually exists, is allocated to this blockchain. We're not going to add to the supply until we add to our supply, our reserves of gold. I don't know what the ratio of backing would be. Maybe historically it's 40 to 1, maybe be 20 to 1. I don't know.
40 to 1 what, sorry?
Sorry, 40%.
Right.
There's backing in the US. They might back it by 20% maybe. I don't know.
So you're still saying, even if that system, came into effect, you expect that only 40% of the actual gold would be redeemable anyway, and that the rest would basically be funny money that relies on people not all redeeming at once, which granted that very rarely happens, and that's kind of how fractional reserve banking works. But you're saying that only 40% would actually be in reserves under that system.
40% is what they had historically.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, if they did 100, the thing is, and this is where there's a kind of debate about gold standard or not, because having a gold standard is good because it encourages discipline. You can't just go, spending money on nonsense. You have to be kind of restrained how you spend your money. You can't spend what you don't have. But at the same time, you do sometimes need a little bit of elasticity where you can, in Australia, for example, you have a couple of bushfires and a flood. You need to be able to go out, spend a little bit more than we've got, but then redeem it back later on. There's no problem with debt as long as you can pay it back. The problem is there's so much of it that people just can't pay it back. It doesn't exist to pay it back.
Yeah, so I think you're bringing up, one of the interesting points for that, people often have against sound money or, hard money, which is if there's a natural disaster or let's say a major world war takes place, China invades Taiwan and it kicks off things with the US and it escalates in ways we couldn't imagine. You would not want your side of the world or your country to be like, well, we'll save up and then we can direct resources and start, building some more aircraft carriers and missiles and drones. Because the government that can print fastest and redirect resources more quickly will win. And equally, in a natural disaster, if Sydney was destroyed by an earthquake tomorrow, but the government only had so much budget that it is set aside in a fixed money supply, it would be limited to the extent that it could help out the residents, right? And so that's one of the main counterpoints against fixed and sound money. Like, what do you say against that kind of a critique? Like, how would you say, fixed money or Austrian School of Economics advocates would say about that?
I think it's a tough one because I think there needs to be some sort of flexibility. I definitely think so. And that's why they had a partial backing. But I think also when you're depending on who you're crediting, the higher the risk of not getting your money back, the higher the interest rate you would put in taking that risk, right? So have credit, but just don't give it to everyone. Mm-hmm. It's it's going to be tricky, but at the same time, and this is where it all comes down to trust. You know, if I trust you that I can lend you money and I will get it back, I have no problem doing that. You know, banks have no problem doing that. It's just when it doesn't get paid back, you know, and that's why they keep lowering these interest rates to make the repayments easier to go back. And, you know, but essentially it's, and this is what I think, is it the Golden Jubilee every 50 years where they have a financial reset, wipe
debt jubilee?
Yeah. Is that right?
It's not a guaranteed thing, but it has happened in the past. I'm not super familiar with it. I've read on it a couple of times, but yeah, a debt jubilee where national debts can't get repaid. You know, a debt jubilee just happened in the US for many students that have had student loans for, I think, you know, it was longer than some period of time, call it 5 or 10 years, and they're still in as much debt or more than when they started university because of the interest and everything else. And they're just drowning in debt. And so Biden's, you know, provided a debt jubilee for a lot of those students and said, like, if you're still repaying it 10 years later, let's just get rid of it. So you've got a fresh start and you're not kind of encumbered.
Yeah. But then here's my question now. Okay, so have a debt jubilee. So you have a bunch of lecturers teaching at university. You have university building, staff, everything like this. And they're getting funded by the students who are paying their tuition fees, essentially, through debt. Now, if they say, all right, you can't pay your debt to the students, does that mean the teachers now get paid nothing? And they've been teaching kids for free for years. Is the university going to take a hit?
Well, no, I guess we know what happens, right? The government pays for the teachers. You know, they don't go without. Or, you know, the university still pays the salaries. I get what you're saying, though, is like those students were customers of the university. Let's say the university is fully privately owned. They owe that money to the business that is the university, which they then use to pay the teachers. And so if your customers aren't going to pay anymore, but you still got to pay your staff, which is your lecturers in this case, it would seem unfair to the university in some ways. Yeah, it's an interesting.
The Austrian School of Economics will say, as a university, you did shit business. You took a risk on people, clients, customers that can't pay you back. As a punishment, you should shut down. You're teaching shit degrees that don't have a job at the end of it. That's why they can't pay back their debts. See you later. That is free market capitalism, right? That's not what happens. What happens is the government, Biden, will step in and say, we'll forgive you. But the reserve banks then, bam, 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 money printer goes off, right? The students, their debts are forgiven now, right? The university still gets paid, but my dollar that used to buy me a can of Coke buys me half a can of Coke.
Yeah, so we're back at the debasement problem. I want to keep this podcast to around about an hour, so I've got a couple more quick fire questions for you before we close it out. So you mentioned blockchain. Obviously, this is a Bitcoin podcast, and so I wanted to get your thoughts on Bitcoin as this newer technology, and what are your thoughts overall of it as a potential money? Why do you think it will or won't work? And then how does that sort of compete or work hand in hand with precious metals and gold?
So I think, okay, so first of all, I have to start by saying my enemy's enemy is a friend, right? So I believe the gold
we're friends, don't worry. I said we're friends.
Yeah, but 90% of the Bitcoiners and the crypto guys and the gold bugs, we will agree on most of this thing. It's a fraudulent Ponzi scheme financial system. Right? That's about to collapse, right? So we agree on that. And now what happens is, when you get time to panic, you look for other ways to get out of fiat currency, essentially. And I think Bitcoin came up in 2008, 2009, with the start, just after the GFC. And it's kind of like, right, this is something it's kind of new. It's blockchain. It's the way of the future. It's programmable smart money, digitalized. I don't think Bitcoin and gold are the same thing. They're two very different things. So even though the crypto people will say, it's digital gold, gold 2.0. It's, you know, Bitcoin coins are depicted as a gold coin with a B on it. You know, all these things. But I don't think it's got the two different things. One of them is essentially software and digital, and one's an element that's physical. You know, gold, weirdly, is measured in weight, right? When they say, you know, how much, if you go to Google now, type into Google, how much gold does China have? How much gold does Russia have? It will tell you they have this many tons. They won't tell you in US dollars. They'll tell you in tonnage, right? And whether it's accurate or not doesn't matter. That's how gold's measured. It's measured in weight. So I think gold and Bitcoin, two very different things. You know, one's physical, one's digital. You know, they are of the same purpose, to escape fiat currency. You can't inflate Bitcoin. It's limited in supply. You know, you can see all the nodes on the blockchain, where it's all going, which again, I don't know if I like that. You know, the fact that
like privacy.
Yeah. So that actually kind of scares me a little bit, you know. But I think you can have both. I think you should have both. You know, in a diversified portfolio. If I had to pick between one or the other, personally, I'll go for gold. But I think there's definitely a place for it. The only problem is, and I don't think it's not a crypto thing, it's a Bitcoin thing, is that and you might hate me for saying this, I believe that Bitcoin is to blockchain what Internet Explorer is to the internet.
So you reckon like almost a first mover disadvantage in that sense, and that, you know, you get iterations and improvements and better cryptos that you know come to the forefront.
Yeah, and when they brought out Bitcoin originally, like the whole idea, you could do peer-to-peer transactions, and if you were worried, you could put it into a cold wallet, you take it over borders, you do all these different things. It's, you know, you have a blockchain essentially with the central ledger with your name on that particular node in your wallet. Cool. But then as soon as they brought in the ETF, suddenly all that disappears. Suddenly it's BlackRock has a node, and you have a certificate exposure to that node. But if you ever want to sell or do, you know, you can't fix the transaction with ETF anymore, right? So then I think it lost a lot of its meaning. As soon as they brought out the ETF, I kind of lost a bit of interest in it. But I also understand that if you're doing lots of work on like the Lightning Network to make it much more usable and things like that. So it's just very, very early days. It's either, in my mind, it's either going to the moon or it's going to the bottom of the ocean. It's very, very early days for me. Gold, silver, it's always been there. Central banks are hoarding it, governments are hoarding it, wars have been fought all over it. So that's why it kind of gives me a bit more security. You know, I sleep better, you know, knowing that my portfolio is in metal.
Yeah. Well, so let's wrap this up for the next 5-10 minutes. Outside of, you know, gold, Bitcoin, that kind of thing, what do you well, you have a business where you've got a bunch of cars that you rent out. Like, what are your thoughts in investing in terms of outside of precious metals and crypto? Like, what do you do?
So I think it's the best investment. This is not financial advice. I think the best investment for everyone right now is get a really big TV and a nice sofa and get comfortable, because the next few years are going to be fucking tough, right? So you need to like be able to ride that out. That's the first thing. I think everyone at the moment, including myself, everyone wants to level up. Everyone wants to, you know, buy a business, start something, build something. I think tech, I don't know about tech. I'm not a tech guy. And AI scared the shit out of me. Right? Where would you even start? You know, you start programming for something and the AI just does it for you. You know, as soon as you start, you're already, you know, 2 years late. So tech, I'll be worried about. Another thing as well is the demographic. You know, we're about to see the baby boomers. I think it's starting now. The biggest generation on earth are all retiring and dying now. Right? And every time they retire, jobs come up for business. Jobs come up for sale. There's going to be so many businesses flooding the market. You know, I think if you want to invest in like healthcare for aged people. I think it's a good investment. Mental health. I think the way the world's going to go over the next few years. I think there's gonna be a lot of old people who need, someone to like help wipe their ass and shit. That's good money. And at the same time as well, as we're going into this digital age, I think people are forgetting the fact that we still live in a physical world. So everyone wants to get rich by, coming up with some new app or some new, and everyone's too good to do plumbing, to lay bricks. AI won't be doing plumbing, right? So if you can start a company or a business that does physical work, I think that would be a good place to be. And in fact, you don't have to start a company. There's some baby boomer who's going to retire tomorrow who'll be selling his company for next to nothing. You just got to be scouring the internet, ready to buy it. So I think there's going to be a lot of businesses for sale. So I wouldn't start one, I'll probably buy one. Aged care could be a big thing. It's like crime, I think, is going to become a huge thing. Mental health for men and sex work for women, I think it's become a huge thing. Not being sexy or anything. Look at COVID, right? That's a sneak preview. Only through the roof. I think that's going to be something. At the moment, I wouldn't rush into anything. I'll just sit back and just watch and save. Because what I think will happen is interest rates are going to stay high for a lot longer than people expect. I think a lot of people will be forced to sell their homes. I think rent will come down because of it. Home prices will come down. And if you're sitting in cash or something that's sound money or something that is of value, I think you'll be buying up a lot of stuff for cheap.
Yeah, isn't Warren sat on like a record stockpile of cash right now as well?
Is he?
Yeah,
probably.
He's in a lot of cash, and he ends up getting a lot of shit for it. It's happened through various periods in history where he's not delivering returns for a few years, and investors start saying, "Oh, he's kind of lost it. He's not how he used to be." And then a 2008 happens, and he's the one with Mr. Moneybags, and basically is able to buy up the whole financial and insurance sector for pennies on the dollar, and then all of his returns come through those kind of moments as well. So
exactly. This is actually what I'm thinking is going to happen too. He obviously is like listening to me,
Yeah, he'll be tuning in right now. I bet.
Yeah. But I think right now it's just about being patient. I think everyone's going to take a haircut. It's just who takes the least haircut.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is going to happen.
What about your haircuts? Okay, and then last one. So, has there been any sort of books that you've read recently, or even a long time in the past, that were sort of instrumental in your position on things?
Yeah, so a couple of books. One of them, of course, is Why Gold, Why Now, by an author called E.B. Tucker. And he actually wrote, he owns a company called Metalla, and they're a metal royalty company. So very cool up. And he talks about all the history of gold, how it kind of gone from different currencies and fiat currencies and come and gone, governments and different things that's happened. He talks about the whole story. Very good book. And the second one, which I think is probably the best book that everyone should read, is Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt. And basically it's a government playbook of how to fuck shit up. Right. So it talks about how governments are going to put red caps, which they're already starting, how they're going to start having the helicopter money, how they're going to start, price controls on things, how they're going to, it talks about everything. And it's amazing because you read this book and then every month you watch a news article and you're like, yeah, tick, exactly what the book said, and it really, really good book, Economics in One Lesson.
Yeah, right. I was like the Book of Nostradamus, but by an economist, it sounds like. So
pretty much, yeah. It's all the how they intervene and stuff, and how it really, I hate them. Government suck.
Yeah. I'm hungry. I'm sure you're hungry. You got to feed those muscles. So it was good to chat, man. And we'll definitely we'll do it again sometime and keep evolving the conversation as things change. But thanks for joining, and hope everybody at home enjoyed listening to this. And Alex, thanks again, and we'll speak again soon.
Anytime.
Cheers, mate.
Catch up.
See you,
Bye.
buddy.